Hello
Hello
there.
there. Welcome back to another episode of Star Wars in the Galaxy, watching all the Star Wars we can get our hands on. I'm Eli.
I'm Jacob.
And today we are back finally after weeks of not recording just due to personal life shifts and stuff like that. We are back and we intend to continue season 22 of Star Wars in a Galaxy until the end of the year, pretty much. We are going to be tackling seasons 22 and 23 of Star Wars in the Galaxy are going to take us to the end of this year, tackling seasons 2, which we're getting pretty close to the end of, and 3 of Star Wars Rebels. I'm incredibly excited to hop back on. Jacob, we're getting to some pretty climactic events in Star Wars
Absolutely.
Rebels.
We are
The
making our way there,
road,
slowly but surely.
I'll say this, the road to Malachor begins today, honestly.
The road to Malachor. It does, yes. It absolutely
The
does with Shroud of Darkness. That is
Yeah,
the
the Shroud
pivotal
of Darkness
moment
begins
inside.
the slow ticking clock to Malachor that will end in episode 184. So, but yeah, no, a lot's happened since we have recorded last. Most notably, I went to DragonCon in Atlanta, Georgia, where I met up with friends of the show, Sean Room, Goose, and Alex and Molly Damon from Star Wars Explained are the ones that I think have been on the show, and many other people. And I was a finalist, third place specifically, in the finals for the Star Wars DragonCon trivia contest. Right here, I'm showing the thing. But anyway, and then I got second place in the Jar Jar Binks 15th anniversary trivia showdown, which competing in those has always been my dream, and I'm really excited after running a trivia show for so long that I got to compete and do so well. I'm incredibly excited that I got a chance to do that, and just seeing people and all the Star Wars stuff. I got to see a panel with the executive producer of this show, Henry Gilroy, who wrote many great episodes of the show, and he was wonderful on that panel, and in talking a lot about specifically the character of Ahsoka Tano and what bringing her to this show meant and how they handled it and stuff like that. And that was incredible to watch. And I just wanted to say thanks to everybody who made my experience there so great. And yeah, but that's all I wanted to say about that. But let's proceed on.
Can I say one thing, Eli?
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
as your co-host, first off, I want to offer you a most hearty congratulations on these well-deserved high placements coming in, making a splash in the Star Wars trivia scene, as you always do. I've known the In a Galaxy community, the epic confrontations, constellation of people. We've known what a trivia demon you are, as I like to say, an absolute trivia sadist, and I'm very glad that now you were able to show that to a wider part of the Star Wars world. And I knew that you were going to make it up on that stage. I knew that you were going to come in and crush it, and I'm so proud of you. And I was so
Thank you
excited.
very much. I really appreciate it.
To watch you send in the pictures and send in the results. So
Thank
I
you so
wasn't
much.
there, but yeah, hats
Truly,
off,
truly
man.
was a
Hats
great
off.
experience. And I really, and congratulations to Thomas Callistoram, who beat me both times and won, who traveled all the way from Australia, studied 2 years, way more hardcore than I've known anybody to do for DragonCon, other than the guy who literally made an entire YouTube channel and became a pseudo internet celebrity to do that. But yeah, no, congratulations to him, congratulations to them. But we're not alone today, Jacob. We're coming back with a bang. We're coming back with a guest episode specifically. Friend of the show, the host of Page Turners They Were Not, and another trivia legend, honestly. The current and reigning First Class League trivia champion, Brennen Marr is here.
Hello.
It's good to have you here, Brennan. Thank you for
Thank you
joining
for
us.
having me. Yes.
Absolutely. And so today we are covering 2 episodes of Star Wars Rebels, The Honorable Ones and Shroud of Darkness. And Jacob, let's get to the summary. Jacob.
All right. In The Honorable Ones, the crew of the Ghost goes to Geonosis to explore a supposedly abandoned space construction station that was abandoned by the Empire. However, when they get there, they realize that it is most certainly not abandoned, and it was a trap laid by Agent Kallus. The rebels manage to fight their way out and escape on the Ghost, with the exception of Zeb, who gets locked in battle with his nemesis Kallus and ends up in an escape pod that hurls towards one of Geonosis' moons and crash lands on the frozen moon. While the rebels are scanning across Geonosis, thinking that the pod has gone down on that planet, Zeb and Kallus are forced to survive in this frigid wasteland planet. Kallus has broken his leg, and Zeb and Kallus have to work together to escape the cave, avoid freezing to death, and avoid these murderous monster giant creatures that want to eat them for lunch. During this, they really get to know each other better. They exchange stories about their past experiences in the rebellion and the Empire, and they actually get to know each other a lot better and come away with much more of an understanding of one another. Zeb manages to salvage the escape pod transponder, and uses that to contact the Ghost who rescues him, and Kallus decides not to be taken prisoner by the rebels and says to Zeb that he prefers to take his chances with the Empire. And the last thing we see is him limping alone, forlorn, through the halls of a Star Destroyer. Next up, in Shroud of Darkness, we open on Eli. Do you know the name of this planet? I couldn't find it.
Yes, Usul.
We open on a planet called Usula, where Kanan and Ezra are being chased down by the fifth brother and the seventh sister, and they're in a very dramatic cliffside lightsaber duel that ends with Kanan and Ezra jumping off the cliff and flying away on the back of a giant creature that Ezra has summoned using his power to connect with animals through the Force. They reconvene with the crew of the Ghost and Ahsoka in deep space, and Kanan decides that what Ezra and him need in order to effectively fight the Inquisitors and protect their friends is more knowledge of the Force, of the universe. So he, Ezra, and Ahsoka go back to Lothal, to the Jedi Temple that Ezra and Kanan had previously visited in season 1 of the show. They go back to the temple and they open it using the Force, only to discover a second door that they had previously not got into, a whole new part of the Jedi Temple. Once inside, all three of them have their own challenges to face. Kanan faces off against a Jedi Temple Guardian who fights him, saying that he is not ready to train Ezra. Ahsoka faces her past with the Jedi. She communes with Master Yoda and also talks to a vision of Anakin and then later Vader. Meanwhile, Ezra talks to Master Yoda, who explains to him that gaining power is not the goal of being a Jedi, and that only fighting he is not going to win if he tries to fight head on. Meanwhile, the fifth brother and seventh sister are rapidly closing in on the temple, and they also enter the temple. And as this is happening, Kanan finds out that the guardian he was talking to was actually the Grand Inquisitor when he was a Jedi. So with the temple collapsing and the Inquisitors rushing in, the Jedi make their escape with the Jedi vision of the Grand Inquisitor, along with other temple guardians, holding off the two Inquisitors. And in the end, the Jedi and Ahsoka do manage to escape, emboldened and strengthened by the new knowledge that they have gained.
Now that we're back, let's dive into the honorable ones.
Can I just say one thing really quick before we get going?
Yeah.
I unfortunately was not able to make it to DragonCon, but I did get to go to Rancho Obi-Wan 2 weeks ago.
Oh, very
yes.
nice.
I think I heard
It
about
was
this. Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And I also cannot wait until Celebration LA so that all of us can meet up together.
Absolutely.
it's going to be a
Celebration
lot of fun.
2027 is going to be incredible. I'm really excited to see everybody in both of our hometown. It's legitimately after 2 celebrations away, outside of the United States. I'm so excited to have it back and so close.
And for me, it's only
It's
5 hours away, so that makes it nice.
yeah, it's going to be great. But let's get to the honorable ones, where this episode takes place above quite a familiar planet. Actually, we get to Geonosis, and the first thing that the rebels note, of course, about Geonosis is who's there, or rather, who isn't.
Mm-hmm.
There's no one there. There's no people. There's no Geonosians. What's going on? And the first thing I'll note about this episode is that I love this, is that they'll go on to the surface of the actual planet next season, and we'll address the mystery of exactly what happened to all of the Geonosians. But I forgot that they started to address this even 1 season earlier. I think Rebels is incredibly good at this, where it plants these mysteries, or it makes these references that you think to yourself, oh, those will make a great story. And then some of them we're still waiting on, but a lot of them they actually do follow up on.
Yeah, Dave Filoni likes to make us wait.
Yeah, he does for a lot of things. Looking at you, Barris. Looking at you. Looking at Barris, looking at the Zillow Beast. Looking at, I'm trying to think of.
Well, just some of the stuff that we see in the Ahsoka series.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff we see in the Ahsoka series. Yeah, I was trying to do a little digging. Apparently, the Dawn of Rebellion reference book specifically says that the specific extermination of the Geonosians happened about 6 years earlier, 9 BBY, around the time of the Obi-Wan Kenobi series and Jedi Survivor.
Okay.
There's no canon, there's reference book on the canon hierarchy is pretty low. So
canon adjacent.
Yeah, so I think it's canon until it's proven otherwise. I'm really I want to see that. I want to see, not to sound too morbid or anything like that, but I want to see exactly what the Empire did to wipe out the Geonosians, mostly because I think it'd be an interesting parallel to the destruction of Tapoka City, as we saw at the end of season 1 of the Bad Batch.
Good point.
I mean, we do have some idea of specifically how they did it. There's the episode in season 3, I believe, where we see the giant sort of poison gas canisters.
Yeah, they did the poisoning, but I want to such an iconic species from the prequel trilogy just completely gone. And I'm fascinated to see how that happened.
I would assume that the Death Star, or at least the Death Star under construction, was in orbit, and that's why they killed them.
Oh yeah, no, I think that's exactly why. Because it was a Geonosian idea.
Interesting to see.
Yeah, because it was a Geonosian idea originally that Palpatine stole. Obviously, once there's a whole history of the Death Star, of how the plans passed from person to person. But obviously, we saw in Attack of the Clones that it's displayed to Dooku, and then Dooku brings it to Palpatine, and blah blah blah. Exactly how the plans go back and forth is a whole saga. Catalyst, I think the Rogue One tie-in novel goes into a lot of that, specifically during the Clone Wars. But yeah, and then of all things, an Imperial astromech droid is the one that rats on them at that space station. Screw that astromech droid, man. Come on. I mean, you're better than this.
Kallus and all the stormtroopers were hiding out there. They knew, I think,
That's
Like
true.
they knew
There
they
was a
were
trap
coming.
set.
Like they were ready to go.
Yeah.
But before we move on, I do want to say I really liked the foreshadowing and the references to the Death Star and the sort of revelation that the Geonosians are all dead. It was very eerie and kind of a very fun way to start the episode. It was a bit jarring, I thought, that we went immediately from the Geonosians, they're all dead. Oh my gosh. To, well, not our problem. Let's go explore this abandoned space station. That was the one of the criticisms I might have had of this episode, was it felt a little bit, I don't know, sort of unnecessarily downplaying. I think just by necessity of it being a 20-minute episode, a kid's show as well. I don't know how to. I kind of have mixed feelings about, like, well, you don't want to make light of what they're saying happened at the same time, like it is a kid's show.
Yeah, I will get into some kid show-esque criticisms that I have later in this episode, but I will say I think that it, not to necessarily even defend it, I think what it did for me was establish like an eerie tone of, well, shit. Last time most folks were here, there was a lively and like Geonosian, like there are many Geonosian hives around here, and like this was not a vacant planet, but now it is. What are we in for? I guess is like the way like it landed for me in the episode, but I understand how it could be a little bit like of a.
I just did an Andor rewatch a couple months ago, and I decided to throw in Rebels at the same time.
Oh, excellent choice.
Excellent choice. We talked about.
If you put all the puzzle pieces together, it's pretty amazing. The storytelling is excellent if you do that.
Yeah, no, we talked a lot about how, at least in my opinion, Andor and Rebels kind of form this dyad to them.
They do, yeah.
And to covering the growth and birth of the rebellion as they do in these very different tones, in these very different styles, but still like working with each other exceptionally well.
I had a friend who had seen Andor, but she had not seen Rebels, and I said that Rebels is basically Andor if it were made for a younger audience.
Yeah, and I think
just about sums it up.
I think it's Andor if it was made in like Andor if it was made in a more like connecting with the more mystical side of Star Wars, connecting with the more silly side of Star Wars, the more pulpy side of Star Wars. It occupies that space as well.
If you add it up, it really fleshes out the timeline very well.
It really does. Yeah, but obviously it's a trap. Akbar says it's a trap, and Kallus and the stormtroopers confront the rebels. I think this is. We always talk about the cuts to title at the beginning of the episodes. I think this was okay. I think this is an episode where the cut to title is much worse than the episode itself is. Obviously, I don't think the cut to title necessarily indicates anything about the episode, although a great cut to title usually doesn't follow like a great cut to title usually doesn't have a bad episode follow it, but a bad cut to title I think can have a good episode follow it. And I think this is a great example of that, where the cut to title is just fine, but the episode is a lot better once we get into the actual meat of the episode.
Yeah,
but let's get going. Zeb lets his desire for revenge separate him from the crew, and both Kallus and Zeb's desires for revenge get them into the mess they get into afterwards, which I think is some good foreshadowing of the kind of issues that are going to be talked about in this episode. Anyone have anything before they get into the escape pod?
I think it's sort of that's the setup, is the beginning. The meat of the episode is like the 50 minutes after that.
Yeah, absolutely. Jacob, want to proceed to the
we can proceed.
Episode?
I love the opening confrontation, sort of the opening fight. I love the touch, the creativity of having the ATDP walkers out on the outside of the station and using the magnetic feet. I love that.
It's really cool, yeah.
But I mean, we should get into it, because I feel like when Zeb and Kallus lock eyes with each other, that's when that's when
the episode
it gets
starts.
real. I mean, the fight, even before they're in the escape pod, just you can feel the animus, the hatred, the anger that's been building up and brewing between these two, and it really feels palpably personal. In an electric way, watching this.
Yeah, there's every time they fight, it builds more tension because of the backstory of the genocide on Lasan, of Kallus viewing Zeb as this loose end that he has to put down. But this episode changes everything. The escape pod with the two of them crashes directly into a cave on the ice moon of Bahryn, which is one of the most unsubtle names I've ever heard for a Star Wars planetoid that I still only realized the unsubtlety of once I heard it aloud at the DragonCon trivia contest. I knew the name of the moon was Bahryn. I didn't realize the obvious the obvious joke that was, because it's a barren moon.
Oh, I just got that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It took me a minute there.
Yeah, it's so dumb, but that's what Star Wars is sometimes.
Well, Star Wars does that sometimes. So.
Yeah, Savage Oppressed comes to mind to me. As Jacob talked about on an early Clone Wars episode that we did, every bad guy ship being named the Malevolence, the Death Star, the Finalizer, the Supremacy, like the most evil sounding names of all time. It's not subtle. But yeah, do you guys want to get on to Bahryn and the conversations that are had?
Absolutely. I mean, this is the core of the episode. I feel obviously the conversations that Zeb and Kallus have.
Yeah, the first quote I have here is, "Maybe you won't die today, but the Empire will win. Every day we recruit more informers. Every day we persuade rebel sympathizers to reconsider their allegiances. And every day more beings get fed up with the Empire and join us." It's a clunky retort logically, but it's still true. The Empire runs on an unsustainable model. There was actually, I wrote this in my notes, I'm now remembering this. There was actually a panel at DragonCon that I saw the title of but didn't go to, called "Why Did the Empire Fail?" And that question is really simple to me. They're fascists, and fascism is, along with its many other flaws, unsustainable. People tend not to like being oppressed in exchange for many major decisions being made for them without their input. They will rise up against that. And from personal experience, of course, that's what Zeb recognizes here. Zeb recognizes that people don't like just having decisions made for them without their consent. And I think it's so interesting to see. One of the things I think is interesting is to see the de-radicalization of Kallus happening in this episode, where Kallus has been so indoctrinated into Imperial ideology that Zeb is saying very simple things that he didn't even know were options.
I want to add to that, I think, as well. I think it goes both ways in a sense, where as much as Zeb, obviously, and justifiably so, can never forget about or forgive the Empire for what they did on Lasan, he also comes away with more of an appreciation for Kallus, and more of a, if not a sense of justification for the things that Kallus has done, but a sense of understanding. When he understands that Kallus was also put in very, very traumatic situations, and is also sometimes more of an implement than a leader when it comes to the violence of the Empire. So I was this is one of my favorite episodes of Rebels, and watching it back, I really love these conversations.
Yeah, there's some great stuff here. Another thing I wanted to add here is I love how paranoid Kallus is. He has learned well from the Imperial model to trust no one, especially not your enemy. despite having such an imposing stature, Zeb is at heart a kind and good person. And I think he recognizes, as you were saying, Jacob, that Kallus is as much a victim of the Empire's cruelty as he is an inflictor of it. I love that Zeb recognizes that capacity for change in Kallus, in a man that he hates so much. Even if Kallus himself doesn't fully realize that recognition yet, I think that's really powerful. I think that this episode. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add on to what you were saying. I think to take that a step further, even I think that Zeb is the spark of change in Kallus. Kallus, even with his leg broken, he's going for his gun, and for a while trying to see if he can get the drop on Zeb or catch him slipping where he can shoot him or take him prisoner. But ultimately he changes his mind, and I think what does that is him experiencing the selflessness of Zeb saying, I'm going to make sure that we're both okay. I'm going to get us out of here. You can't move. I'm going to put you on my back and carry you out of here. I'm going to give you the rock so you can warm yourself. I'll make you the splint for your leg. Despite the fact that we have this history of hating and trying to kill one another, now that we're in this situation, that's something that by embodying that spirit, Zeb engenders that in Kallus, and then obviously we get the moment when Kallus comes home to the Empire and kind of realizes.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah, we won't get ahead of ourselves. But
yeah,
I just wanted to agree with what you were saying and take it a step further.
I think there's something really interesting about this episode, specifically on the grounds, and then I'll pass to you, Brandon. I think there's something really interesting about this episode on the grounds of there's a common story type, and I'm blanking on one right now. Honestly, this is kind of there's a kind of they kind of do this in Heroes on Both Sides in the Clone Wars, where two warriors or just generally people on different sides of a war get to meet each other face to face and realize they're not so different after all. That's a pretty common story archetype.
Mm-hmm.
And what I love about this episode is that it doesn't do that. Yes, these are two warriors who believe fiercely in their side of the conflict, but they are different. They fundamentally believe differently from each other. But what this episode does is put them in a room and make them work together, put them in a cave and make them work together, and have them see how the ideology that they have been working for affects them. What does being a rebel mean to Zeb? What does being an Imperial mean to Kallus? And I think they both come away with valuable knowledge of what the other side means to the people who are fighting for it. Now, does that mean that Zeb necessarily has more sympathy for the Empire at the end? No, it doesn't. But what it does mean, at least for me, is that Zeb has only lived a life of a species that has come under the reign of Imperial fascism. So he doesn't understand what it means to live and die by it, or how people could fall for it. But now I think he understands a little bit better how people can
you're
fall
absolutely
for it.
right. It's a very good point.
Brennan, I'll pass it over to you. From the beginning of this, the idea of these two people who hate each other, forced to work together, put in a cave. Any thoughts you have?
Yeah, I think that the fact that they end up in a cave is important. Because as we've seen in Star Wars, going all the way back to The Empire Strikes Back, you get the cave. Where a character goes in and they come out differently.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point.
Very good point. I didn't even think about that, but the cave in Star Wars has great symbolic.
But even the original film, the trash compactor scene.
Yeah, just generally going into a dark place and coming out into the light a different person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they do, even if it's not sunny outside or anything like that. They come out of the cave some say they literally come out of the cave, but they come out of the cave with a place of more understanding, with a place of more understanding, with a place of more empathy, I'll say. And then they get attacked by an unnecessarily large creature, which I actually think was the trivia question, which was what creature they got attacked by. And I wasn't asked it, and I'm going to look it up right now because I have no clue what that creature is. Let's see.
Strange looking lizard bird.
It's a bonzami. Is the creature. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I just found this on Wikipedia. It is designed. The design of their horn and beak was inspired by that of a truck-mounted snowplow, while their name is a tuckerization of Zamboni.
Wow.
That's
I
very
love that.
funny.
I love that.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah, no, but yeah. And so they have to work together to defend themselves from that crazy, unnecessary large creature, which I love. I love Star Wars and its unnecessarily large creatures. But then they keep on talking. I never asked questions. Well, maybe you should stop. Or are you afraid of the answers you'll get?
Yeah.
Yet again, another good point from Zeb. But as he probably knows, asking questions is not in the fascist playbook, very much on purpose. There is a pretty high chance Kallus has been conditioned into not even knowing asking questions is an acceptable option.
Yeah, good point.
Jacob, do you have any moments from their conversations that you want to bring up?
Oh gosh. I mean, yeah, the asking question things like you said, like that blew Kallus's world open, blew the door open just a little bit, thinking about how propagandized he is within the Imperial military, and then also how much of a believer he seems to be much of the time. Yeah, I think I'm ready to move on to the next leg.
Yeah.
Of the episode.
We have the revelation, which actually I had a different. I have an interpretation here in the episode, like in my notes, and now I'm kind of forming a different interpretation, which is about the revelation of the Busan Kira. I didn't take the bow rifle as a trophy. The Lasat guardsman I faced, he fought well, died with honor. He gave me the rifle before the Busan Kira. After which Zeb explains that it's a Lasat custom to give an opponent one's bow rifle when they beat you with honor. And I said in my notes like a whole like spiel about like I think Kallus has honor, but it's Imperial honor, which is kind of not really honor because it's honor in service of fascism and all that kind of stuff. But now I'm kind of having a different interpretation of that, which is there was all this bravado and bluster that when Kallus was talking about how he took the bow rifle in season 1, but that wasn't. But now I'm realizing like, no, that wasn't the truth though. Like the fact that Kallus is revealing the actual truth of what happened to Zeb is way more important because it's admitting that he had fear. It's admitting he'll talk about Saw's Lasat mercenary that took out his entire squadron that spared him. And to me, like, I think he's trying to use it as a way for Zeb to sympathize with him. But I think what it does for me is not like necessarily like say, oh, like look at the poor little Imperial soldier over there, but that Kallus is admitting that he is not this all power, like it's not this like crazy powerful scary Imperial soldier, but that he was just a guy doing a thing, and he eventually climbed the ranks because he was a guy doing a thing very well. Like there's a lot of power in the idea because no normal Imperial would admit to just following orders but being scared under their current regime. Nobody would admit to that. That's not the Imperial mindset. That's not how they do things. And I think that there's real, like, I think that's the moment that we're starting to see Kallus fully change. Obviously, that's going to be a process throughout Rebels that's not going to fully solidify until the end of season 3.
Yeah.
But it's a process that's really important. It's a process that's really important. I'll pass it over to Brennen of anything about any of this conversation that Zeb and Kallus are having in the cave.
I think that we get to know these characters better. Zeb is not one who likes to talk about his past. And I don't think Kallus is either. So in terms of character development, having them open up like this is really important for their characters. And I think that in the case of Zeb, I don't think season 1 did Zeb a lot of favors because he was just sort of there, always arguing with Ezra and things like that.
Yeah.
I think it's after this episode in season 2 that Zeb really becomes a popular character. That now we understand him and his motivation and his backstory so that we get a sense of this character is deeper than we might have originally thought.
Yeah, I think this episode does a really great job of reaching into that depth with both characters that put on this bravado, but are really complicated people and multifaceted people inside who don't often get to talk about it or really feel comfortable showing it. Jacob, I'll pass it to you. Any thoughts on this or anything else from the episode? I think.
No, I completely agree with what you guys said about Zeb or Kallus, and especially Zeb. I think I enjoy this episode especially because I'm a big Zeb fan. I'm a big fan of all of the Ghost Crew, but I'm a big Zeb fan, and I think he's normally not necessarily the leader, and he doesn't always get to exercise a lot of leadership, and this is a moment when he really does. And oftentimes when those moments happen, we see that he has, like you guys said, he has more depth, more complexity, and a lot more thoughtfulness, I think, than he often sort of appears to in the episodes when he's part of the ensemble and he's playing the role of being Zeb who's big and loud, and Zeb who argues with Ezra and gets in fights with Chopper. I think that's part of what makes this episode stand out. And I think it's just I think it's so beautiful watching Kallus and Zeb sort of process some of their traumas together, because despite everything, like you guys said, they have in some ways similar paths or commonalities within their paths that led them to become who they are, and why they're fighting for the things they are, why they're believing what they're believing.
We have another line I have here. Well, you can't judge all Lasats the same. Does that sentiment apply to Imperials? And I thought that was interesting, and I said, well, to a certain extent, Kallus, no, it doesn't. A Lasat can't choose what species they are, but somebody chooses to be Imperial. They may be indoctrinated, coerced, or bribed, but unless they were forced, that's still their choice. To be clear, I'm not saying once an imp, always an imp, because there are so many examples to prove that sentiment wrong in Star Wars, but merely that if one lives and dies by the Imperial ideology, like other fascist ideologies, I believe they ought to be judged upon that above merely anything else.
I also think that in some ways Zeb is applying that to Kallus. Like he is giving Kallus a second chance, and he is willing to believe in the possibility of there being another story for Kallus, because Kallus has his story about, in his mind, he has the story of who Zeb is and why he does what he does, and that's not the case. And in Zeb's mind, he had the story partly because Kallus kind of said so as a battle tactic to try and get in his head. Zeb has a story, a single story about who Kallus is, where he comes from in terms of his path to that moment, and he ultimately is willing to say, you know what, there might be more to this story, and ultimately he helps Kallus write a different ending because of that.
Yeah. I, however, would argue, though, that he was only open to Kallus's story because he saw the capacity of him to make a change.
Yeah, and
I think
that's not a given. He had to. That
it's
was
not.
a.
Yeah,
It was an incredible. It was a leap of faith, and it was an action of profound trust that he said, Kallus, I'm going to. Through his actions, he said that he was going to trust Kallus to not shoot him when he was vulnerable, as he tried to save both of them.
at the end, yes, absolutely.
So you don't always know. You can't always see whether someone, can or can't change in the way that you're hoping they will.
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, it's not about whether he will or will not change. It's about whether change is even in the conversation. Like, there
Yeah.
are some Imperials that given the same circumstance, would not have done or would not have considered to do what Kallus did. And I think Zeb, from pretty early on, sensed that it was within the realm of possibility that Kallus could. Not that he would, but that he could.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think Zeb really, the way that I interpreted and experienced this episode, I don't feel like Zeb was necessarily trying to turn Kallus away from the Empire. Certainly he was hoping and trying his best to make sure that Kallus would not stab him in the back, and that they could be civil long enough to escape. But I don't think he necessarily even saw what was to come, and saw how his actions and how his generosity sort of would impact Kallus.
I agree with you that I don't think that Zeb was trying to turn Kallus. But there is a key word I add to the end of that sentence. Consciously. I don't think Zeb was trying to turn Kallus. I don't think that was a stated purpose inside Zeb's brain that he was trying to do. But I think that there's a part of him that looks at Kallus and whether he knows it or not, and I suspect the answer is not, at least yet, sees, I identify with at least some part of you, and you could be doing better. And you could do better than this.
That's absolutely a possibility. The commonality that they find is sort of that becomes key to the fact that this unfolds and how it unfolds the way it does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but and I think that that's one of the strengths of this episode is, like, you look back to the Luke quote that I love from Battlefront 2, where he tells Del on Pilio, "I'm giving you a choice," and Del says, "What, you mean the rebellion?" And he says, "No, I mean a choice to be better."
Yeah.
And I think the great strengths of this episode is that it shows that you don't have to be a Jedi to do that. That anybody can give somebody else a choice to be better, a chance to be better, and that's what Zeb does for Kallus here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, anything. Yeah, and then he reveals that says on Lasan it wasn't supposed to be a massacre. I know before I took credit for it, and yeah, there's conversations to be had, and I think maybe if actually I'll pass it to Brennan first before I have this before we have this bigger conversation about something I think Rebels could have done a little bit better, just generally as a show. Brennan, do you have anything about any of the conversation? Anything more about any of the conversations that we had brought up?
Well, I think that the Kallus's line about it wasn't supposed to be a massacre is interesting because I think that if I had to guess, I would assume it got out of hand, but I think that Kallus is using the excuse that a lot of people make. Well, we didn't know it was going to be like this. There's a movie from 1961 called Judgment at Nuremberg, which is about the Nuremberg trials after the World War II. And there's a similar line in there about we didn't know it was going to be like this. And basically the response to that statement was, well, you know what you signed up for, so, it's going to happen eventually, and I think that that's going to happen here. We don't really have a lot of the specifics on the massacre.
Yeah, they don't.
Sounds like the Empire went a little overboard.
I think that we don't know. Maybe it wasn't intended as a massacre and it got out of hand. I happen to think that Kallus wasn't given all the full details of what exactly the Empire was planning to do.
Yeah, good point.
I think that maybe he was lied to. That makes the most sense to me as to what the Empire would do, is to tell the soldiers something like vague, but like, oh, it's just a containment operation or something like that. Like, without spoiling too much for Jacob because he hasn't seen season 2 of Andor yet, you could argue the Gorman massacre wasn't intended as a massacre, but also the Empire definitely intended for something to happen there. And yeah, I also want to see what happened on Lasan. Jacob and I talked about recently on a previous episode an idea for Tales of the Honorable Ones with 3 shorts for Zeb, 3 shorts for Kallus, and the final one of each would be the genocide on Lasan from each of their perspectives, is what I proposed. And I think that would really enrich exactly things like this episode and things like Legends of the Lasat from both of their perspectives. I think that would enrich Legends of the Lasat and this episode, seeing exactly how things went down on Lasat. Because, again, any Imperial genocide is a major event in galactic history, and I think they deserve to be covered and seen because of stories, real and fictional. But what was I going to say? Jacob, do you have anything else before we get to that very end of the episode, that coda of the episode, which I think is so beautiful?
I think we've covered it pretty well. I mean, I think, yeah, the very end of the episode is as visually beautiful and stunning as this episode is, with all these gorgeous backdrops of the ice moon, the cave, the sunsets, Geonosis hanging low in the sky. The moment and the image, when I think about this episode, that sticks in my head the most is Kallus stricken, alone.
Well, let's go. I want to go
the Star
first
Destroyer.
but I want to go first to the Ghost Crew, who are so happy to see Zeb.
Yeah, and that's the contrast.
Thrilled to see Zeb, and Kallus has the chance to go with them, but he doesn't. Instead, he goes back to his room on the Imperial Star Destroyer, which probably looks similar to most of the other Imperial rooms on that Star Destroyer, isolated, alone. He says hi to Constantine. He doesn't care. And that moment, I think, is the first real spark outside of the cave that really has him ask that important question. It's one of my favorite scenes from documentary. It's one of the Revenge of the Sith documentaries where George is talking to Hayden Christensen about Anakin's psychology, and he's saying, well, normally there's always this small part of Anakin's brain that's asking himself, what am I doing? And the larger parts of his brain will justify this. I'm doing this for Padme, I'm doing this for us, I'm doing this for blah, blah, blah. But there's always this small part of Anakin's that will always ask him, what am I doing? And I think that part of Kallus's brain is firmly taking over in a way that Anakin's won't for a long time, of, what am I doing here? I've become an agent for the ISB. I have done all of this hard work. And for what? What am I doing this for?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll see how that starts a trajectory for Kallus that will continue on a multi-season long journey for him. And I think that's really interesting. And as you were saying, Brennen, about Kallus, I think that's honestly doubly true for about Zeb, should I say. I think, as you were saying about Zeb, about him not being really, I'm not doing anything in season 1, I think that's doubly true for Kallus. I mean, he was really just a face for the enemy of the Empire, but now we're seeing him being given this incredibly complex arc about what it means to turn away from this ideology that you've known your entire life and that you've lived and died by,
Mm-hmm.
and what it means to say no. I think that will transition me, if I may, before we end this episode, into the criticism I have, not of this episode necessarily, but of Rebels as a show. I think that this show does a remarkable job, as a lot of Star Wars shows do, of showing that journey and showing specifically Kallus turning away from the Empire and saying, no, this is not who I am anymore, and this is not who I want to be. What I think this show does not do, what this show does not do at all, and that I would have wanted to see, is atonement. Is Kallus, okay, you turned away from the Empire, that's great, but you've done so much bad for them already.
Yeah.
What are you going to do to make it up? And that's not necessarily to say that you have to do X, Y, and Z and then boom, you're fixed. But obviously, at the end of the show, Zeb takes Kallus to Lir Rasan to show him, hey, look, you didn't actually do a genocide. Cool. He still killed and tortured and oppressed a ton of people as an ISB agent for the Empire.
I mean, I don't necessarily think that the point of that at all is to excuse or lessen what he did, but merely to bring him as a character in the show, let him have a happier ending than the other ones.
Yes, and I understand that. I understand again, as we were talking about earlier, this is a kid show and all that kind of stuff. But still, this show does mature with its audience, and I would just love to see in future Star Wars stories Kallus reckoning with and atoning for all of the atrocious actions he committed while he was an Imperial agent.
Yeah.
Because redemption is not just about, he said he's sorry to Zeb, cool. It's not just about switching sides and doing things for the good guys now, and now you're better. It's about actual atonement, and I think Star Wars has had. Yeah.
Well, the story hasn't even really decided what he's actually done yet. Like you guys have both said, there's a lot of we just don't know. That statement by him, was that truthful? Was he really misled? Was he manipulated? Does he just regret it now? How much of a hand did he have in this? What actually happened? we don't. There's a lot we don't know.
It is incredibly vague, and you're right about that. But I would have loved to see, and I still would like to see, Zeb do some actual atonement for what he did. Not Zeb, Kallus. Kallus do some actual atonement for what he did. But yeah, do you guys have anything else for this episode, either of you?
No.
What overall thoughts about this episode? Jacob, I'll pass it to you first.
Really, really love this episode. I love the points that you guys brought up. I think that it's a beautiful episode. It's necessary. And yeah, I really, really liked it.
I agree.
I like this episode a lot. I don't think I'm as keen on it as a lot of hardcore Rebels fans are. It's not to say I hate it. I love it. I think that there are other episodes that just speak to me more.
Yeah.
And speaking of an episode that speaks to me more, let's talk about Shroud of fucking Darkness.
Yes.
My lord. I'm just gonna say this, one of my favorite episodes of this season, one of my favorite episodes of the series.
Absolutely.
I think probably my second favorite episode of this season, maybe third behind Princess of Lothal. But Shroud of Darkness, we start in the middle. We do an in media race, as media scholars call it. We start in the middle of things with this epic duel between the seventh sister, the fifth brother, and Kanan and Ezra. I just want to start by saying, what a remarkable duel. I really do. I really love this duel. I think it's fun. I think it's dangerous. I think it's creative with the things they do with the cross. This is exciting. It's really exciting. We haven't seen like the future of the Force. We saw Kanan and Ezra struggling to get away before Ahsoka cleans house. But like, it's weird because like Kanan and Ezra seem to have like the attitude of, oh, another duel. When we really haven't seen them duel seventh sister and fifth brother a whole bunch of times a whole lot of times on the show. They seem to be intimating they seem to be like suggesting about a lot of duels that we haven't seen as well, which I would love to see. But like this duel, I think is just really energetic. Starts us off with the idea of, oh my god, the rebels are in danger. They're in danger from the Inquisitors, and the Jedi specifically have really got to figure out something on a larger scale to do about these damn Inquisitors.
Yep.
Jacob, any thoughts about the opening duel other than the great meta joke that Seventh Sister makes? That great, such a handsome face. I don't go for crazy anymore, which is Freddie Prinze Jr. speaking to his wife, Sarah Michelle Gellar, because sometimes you have to make a meta joke like that.
Yeah, I mean, I love this opener. I absolutely love it. The choreography, the dramatic backdrop, the cliffside, the way that they engage the environment, the way Ezra and Kanan fight together so tightly and perfectly, and they're so coordinated. It's so cool. I love the crazy escape on the backs of the creatures as well. It's so much fun. It's just so much fun.
Great cut to title as well. Kanan and Ezra cornered by Inquisitors on a foreign world. Like, nothing better to get the blood pumping. And then immediately, what are we going to do about them? I don't know, but it's endangering the whole squadron. And one of the things we get to in this episode, which I think this episode engages with incredibly well, which is, if you don't see, like, it's a larger question of, how do you fight without losing yourself? If you're not, how to continue on sustained warfare, or just continue on sustained anything in life when you're not getting anywhere? Like, there's a question of fighting in the short term, and we've passed that. It's to fight or not to fight, and Ezra and Kanan have chosen to fight. That they chose that a long time ago. Ezra chose that in the first episode. That is a non-question point. But the question now is, to continue how to continue. And like, what's the best ways of doing that? Especially if you want to end this. What if you want to end this? What if you want this to like? What do you want? What if you want to be able to protect people? These larger questions that will be asked for the rest of the show as well, which I think is really great. Yeah. Anything that Brennan, actually, I never asked you about the fight on Usalon, which is a great planet name, and I'm sad. Like, this is a great planet. It looks like a cool planet. We never see it again. I hope to see it again someday. Anything you have about this fight, Brennan?
It's a great intro. I really enjoy this. And yet again, we see Ezra's connection with animals.
Yep. Ezra's continuing to connect with nature. I want to see what these creatures are, because I'm always curious. Let's see. Oh, they're Tibities. I forgot they're Tibities.
Yep.
They're Tibities. Yet another species named due to just behind the scenes shenanigans. They couldn't think of a name, and they just go with they just go with TBD. That's what they do. They go with TBD, which is very funny.
Speak Star Wars naming. It's like half the time it's like deep. It like references to history and religious history. The other time it's just
we'll figure it out.
We'll slap some shit together.
It's the I'm a Gundai.
Yeah, it's
the I'm a Gundai effect. Yep. Yeah, but quickly, Kanan and Ezra say we're gonna need advice on. Kanan says to Ezra, "We're gonna need advice on this." Immediately, we hear the Ahsoka theme, and that's how you know this episode's gonna be a great one. Yeah. Let's see. Keeping your saber moving is key to deflecting the fire of multiple adversaries. I wanted to send it to you, Jacob, first, because I think you might have more strong opinions on this. What do you think of Anakin Skywalker's Rebels look?
I know people criticize it heavily. I don't know. I think I'm torn because if you don't like the way he looks in this show, you don't like the way he looks in the show. But a lot of the criticism a lot of the criticism with Rebels comes down to this looks different from the Clone Wars. Like, why does this character, like with the Yoda, this character looks different? Of course it's going to look different. It's a different show. It's a different art style with different goals to deliver a different experience. Personally, I really like the Rebels art style overall. I think there are some weak spots, some moments where it doesn't translate as smoothly, oftentimes with characters that have already been rendered in animation elsewhere or live action. But overall, like I don't really think it's such a big part of the episode that it feels difficult to get past by any means.
I am on the same page as you, which is I'm not a huge fan of it, but it's also like not a huge deal for me. And I'm more just excited to see the character even in a hologram and hear Matt Lanter again back.
Oh, yes.
Brennan, do you have any other thoughts about Anakin's look?
I think it looks fine for this show. I think certainly with the age range that the show is going for, this is definitely not. The Clone Wars was, to my knowledge, a very expensive show to make.
Yes.
Rebels feels more like the kind of show that you make just a weekly show for a younger audience.
Yes.
And the CGI is not always going to be as good as what you could do like in a movie or like in the Clone Wars. But I think it absolutely captures the essence of the character in a way that feels like this is what he would look like in this kind of style. So I don't mind it. I think it looks fine. And hearing Matt Lanter is always great.
Hearing Matt Lanter is great. I really appreciate how Ahsoka clearly has a lot of recordings of Anakin, as we see in Ahsoka. She has another one in Ahsoka of him that she carries with her, and that Anakin still means a lot to her in this way. And of course, we'll see exactly how that impacts goes through in this episode. We also get another mention of a form of lightsaber dueling, where it says, "Here's a version of Form 4 that I made some modifications to in order to fight battle droids better," which adds up very well with because Form 4 Ataru was a more acrobatic form of lightsaber combat, and battle droids are not very like you don't really need acrobatics to combat battle droids. And so Anakin making some modifications to Form 4, which was one of his preferred styles, to make it more akin, like more better suited to fight battle droids, makes a lot of sense. But I'll go out of nerd mode to talk about to talk about Ahsoka, talk about Anakin. He was powerful, rarely lost a battle. But what would have surprised people was how kind he was. He cared deeply about his friends and looked out for them until the end.
Mm-hmm.
I love that line specifically as deeply haunting foreshadowing,
Yeah.
where a lot of Ahsoka's journey from here on out, and I think Ahsoka only adds to this, is how could this guy I knew, who was such a good human being, become such a monster? How could he fall this far?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that knowing exactly how Ahsoka thinks of Anakin before really is incredibly important because of the journey to after. The journey of, well, we know what she thinks he was. Now, once she knows the truth, what's the verdict now?
Yeah.
I think that's incredibly important. Jacob, anything about this recording or anything like that?
Not really. I think it's interesting that she emphasizes Anakin's kindness because while we get to know him so much in the Clone Wars, especially, but that's not necessarily something. Although it's always sort of present, his intense care and attachment to those close to him, and his really often kind and good-heartedness. What's emphasized and really centered in the Clone Wars is often the darkness rising within him and his darkness. And I think that this is this moment, it changes the way I think about and the way I remember the Clone Wars and Anakin's journey with Ahsoka every time that I watch this episode. And I'm reminded, like, this is also the kind of impact that he had on the people around him. Other than that, I'm ready to move on.
Yeah, I think that there's. I will say that I see what you're saying with the idea that, like, oh, I don't really think of his kindness too much. But to me, I think a lot of the dark side turn that was emphasized in the Clone Wars was actually done away from Ahsoka. Like, Ahsoka doesn't see a lot of the darkness within Anakin. A lot of that happens either away, like physically away from her, or on a mission with Obi-Wan. Only, like, it makes a lot of sense to me that Anakin kind of hid that part of himself from her. And that just seems like, yeah, that just seems like something he would have not even maybe consciously done. Yeah, I have another line. The last time I saw Anakin, he was rushing off to save the Chancellor. Then everything changed, which I just want to remark on how well the Siege of Mandalore was done. That this line still fits perfectly afterwards.
Yes.
That's some good stuff right there, because they could have easily messed with some stuff to make that different now, but they didn't. That's still true. It's times like this that Anakin and I would turn to somebody like Obi-Wan and Master Yoda, which is very funny to me that she named the two Jedi that we know are still alive, but they don't. I mean, will Anakin and will Kanan and Ezra kind of know about Yoda, but still, like, the aliveness of him is like kind of like never really like addressed, whether it's like they know he's alive or they think he's alive, or it's weird. But yeah, let's go back to Lothal. Why don't we? We're back to Lothal again, but for the purposes of this episode, let's do it. I like to think of this episode. I think of this episode kind of as the inverse of Path of the Jedi, where instead of just Ezra being tested, all three of them are tested, and
Yes.
of course, this episode carries that veneer of a lot more darkness to it. Literally, Shroud of Darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, first things first. Ahsoka doesn't open the temple.
Ah.
Thoughts about this, Jacob, before I reveal my interpretation of this? Ahsoka can't open the temple?
Not many, I think, for me. It makes sense for her.
Yeah.
She's not there yet. I think it's not a matter of, I think she explained, the show kind of explains it. We don't really, it's not necessarily a matter of her having animosity or a lot of pain. That's not really what's relevant. What's relevant is the fact that she just isn't a part of the Jedi.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting about this is I actually think she technically could open the temple, but I think that she doesn't.
Yeah.
Because it's not her story.
Yeah, you don't have to be a part of the Jedi Order to open the temple. I mean, we see the Inquisitors go in.
Yeah, but even then, after they open the temple, it rejects them, which I think is really interesting. Because I think the temple has this form of not necessarily even sentience, but kind of sentience, where it recognizes that the Inquisitors aren't of the Jedi. They don't do what the Jedi do anymore, even if they once did. And I think that there's there's a beauty to that. I think that there's I don't know how to describe it, but there's something so interesting about Ahsoka being allowed in and tested just like a Jedi, even though she declares she is not one. But the Inquisitors being rejected because Ahsoka, even though she does not identify as a Jedi anymore, still practices a lot of the values of the Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
And the Inquisitors don't.
Yeah, well, I think as well, this is an example of, what does Yoda say? Only what you take, what's in the temple, you'll find what you take with you. Or what's in the cave, you'll find what you take with you, to go back to the Empire Strikes Back. I think the temples are sort of the same. I mean, all of every time the characters have a journey in the temple, it's an intimate reflection of who they are, who they want to become, and what they're struggling with. I think for the Inquisitors, it's the same way, where they are practicing engaging with the Force, engaging with the dark side in an incredibly thoughtless way, where there's not much that they're going to find besides being attacked by their own fear. And that's exactly what happens.
I like that idea, especially because the idea of the temple is a form of growth and the Inquisitors not wanting to grow.
Yeah.
I think that's really fascinating.
But the temple does reveal something to them. It reveals that the Grand Inquisitor used to be a Jedi.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe
I think they knew that, though.
Maybe on some level, his part of his spirit is going back to that. I don't.
Unfortunately, not. I'm gonna say that interpretation is not, unfortunately, probably true only because of a comic where it's revealed that Vader has trapped the Grand Inquisitor's spirit, tethered between life and death.
What? Oh,
which legitimately,
Okay.
I'm not joking about this. This is in Star Wars. This is in the Star Wars comic written by Charles Soule. It's some great stuff. I think there's some great stuff in there. But I think that I think the Grand Inquisitor, at least part of his spirit, maybe that was only part of his spirit. I don't know. I didn't want to sound like I'm actually fanboy there, but the idea of some part of his spirit returning to the original Jedi purpose, that idea, I think is interesting. Maybe that's an interesting idea of a split spirit. They kind of do that with Revan in Legends, where one part of Revan's spirit is light and one part of Revan's spirit is dark, and all that sort of madness. But I like the idea of the Grand Inquisitor. One part is still stuck on, I think, that planet's called Tempes, in the Star Wars comic, but another part is in the Lothal Temple, where he has seen the light and follows the light. I think that's a really interesting idea. Brennan, any thoughts about like the temple revealing a new part of itself, the temple sentience, all that kind of stuff?
Well, I think that it's very strong in the Force, and so there's a lot going on in there that is very. It's a vision. There's a lot of it that is leaving some interesting room for interpretation. And we know that Dave Filoni likes to be tricky about that. And so I think that a lot of what we see is what the characters need to see at that moment. And whether or not it's literal, we don't really know. But we do know that it shows them what they needed to see.
Yeah. And that is what the Inquisitors needed to see. All right. Yeah, Kanan very, very well, like, kind of meta-splains new problem, new door. Yeah. Let's see. Which vision do we want to go to first? Jacob, you have any opinions?
No, wherever you want.
I think let's go. I think actually it makes sense to go to Ezra first. And here's why. I think Ezra's vision is actually the least the least interesting, at least for me, of the three. And that's weird. And that's means something coming from me because it involves literally my favorite Star Wars character of all time. But yeah, I want to go to Ezra's first. Ezra finally gets to see Master Yoda. But before he does, I was just scrolling through my notes and I just saw this. I forgot about this great description of Yoda. I'm not sure anyone knew what Yoda was like from Ahsoka. He was wise, kind, but when I was young, he seemed happier. As the Clone Wars dragged on, he carried a great burden, a deep sorrow, almost as if he knew before anyone else that one time was ending and another beginning, which I love. That's awesome. I think this episode of Rebels, I looked it up. This is a Henry Gilroy episode of Rebels, which explains why it's so great to me. I think the description of Yoda, along with Ahsoka's description of Anakin, I think is really great. They're both really great descriptions of these characters. I'd really love to see. I don't know if this is maybe just me, but like, I'd really love to see like a story about like maybe some smaller actions Yoda was taking at the end of the Clone Wars to like do what the priestesses told him to do and basically win the war that most people didn't even know was coming.
Yeah.
Like, I think that'd be really interesting.
It would be, yeah.
Yeah. What do you both think about? Do you both have any strong opinions about Yoda's design in Rebels? I actually really like it. I think it's the best animated design of Yoda, even though I don't think it's perfect.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't have strong opinions. Like, it goes with the kind of is dictated by the style of Rebels. They could have done it a different way. If you like it, you like it. If you don't, I don't love it. I don't hate it. It's Yoda.
Yeah.
You know? I love Yoda.
Yeah.
I mean, I was excited to see him anyway, so.
That's true. Yeah, no, it's very exciting to see the Grand Master yet again. Growing your abilities are, and with them, danger. This is our, to use the wrestling terms, this is our part. This is setting up for a little bit of a heel turn for Ezra. Not much, but like, this is setting up a path of real darkness for Ezra that's available. I'm not saying that happens, but that is available for him. And I think that's really important that it's set up here before we talk about Malachor. Yeah. Yoda asks, actually, yeah. Anything specifically? I'm trying to think about how to do this. You know what? Let's do this now. Was it wrong for the Jedi to fight? Is it wrong for me to protect my friends? Wrong? A challenge lifelong it is, not to bend fear into anger. Give me a second. Yeah, but Master Yoda, how are we supposed to win if we don't fight back? Win. How Jedi choose to win, the question is. This, to me, is one of my favorite lines of the show. This line's been discussed to death, and I think for good reason. It's kind of the theme statement of the show going forward. It is about that, to me, is about, we can describe this as kind of Kanan's journey in this episode too. It is all about how you fight. The question, as I said before, is not about whether to fight. We've done that anymore. We've done that in Star Wars. We did that in the show. That, like, we been there, done that. We know that fighting is the answer when necessary. When you need to, when against fascism, you need to stand up. You need to fight. But then there's the question of how to fight. And look, I'm not going to pretend that I or this show has an answer of how to fight. But just the very conscious act of thinking about how one fights is a step is a step in the right direction, in my opinion. The idea, like, and I think this is we talked so much on this show. I'm gonna bring up a Jacobism a little bit about how the Jedi lost their way, and I think one of the things with that is not allowing themselves to make mistakes. Is being so rigid towards the code of theirs that they didn't allow themselves, and they viewed mistakes with great disdain. Where if one takes accountability for their mistakes, it doesn't need to be a big deal. If somebody messes up, if somebody chooses the quick and easy path once, but then acknowledges it, like, the idea of, and we've talked about this before, and I think I've talked about this before, about how Yoda was wrong about once you go down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny? No, it's forever can it dominate your destiny. It's not a death sentence. It should be a reminder that if you start making these bad decisions, then you can start justifying them real quickly. But it's not, but if you do that, and then if you make one bad decision and then realize what you've done, it's not too late for you. And Luke very quickly proves him wrong in Return of the Jedi by proving just that. By making the right decision and having Anakin make the right decision. Yeah, anything about the theme of choosing how Jedi choose to fight? I'll put it out to the field.
I think you look at the history of Star Wars, and you look at, like, for example, Luke Skywalker. And there were two great victories that Luke had that did not involve violence at all. One was throwing down his lightsaber on the Death Star.
Yes.
And the other was facing the First Order without fighting. So we have seen some great examples of, here's how you can fight back without using violence. And other times where the characters have had to resort to violence. So I think that one of the big lessons of Star Wars is it depends on the situation. And even if you have to physically fight back, you can't allow yourself to become as evil as those you're fighting. And I think that's what Yoda is trying to warn Ezra about.
I completely agree. I think, yeah, you said it. If Ezra chooses to embrace the power that he can get and the ability to accomplish all of his perceived goals and wishes of protecting his friends, fighting against the Empire, that if he uses the dark side to get that, he will end up inflicting that same suffering.
Yeah. I think that there is a, like, what I love the most about this episode is that they go to this Jedi Temple for answers. They need to know how to defeat the Inquisitors and Vader and stand up to them and all that kind of stuff. At no point did they get those answers. But what they do get is more valuable than any answer would be, which is wisdom. There is no good answer to how to fight back in a way that they'd want there to be. The best answer is the best you can. And that's an annoying answer, and nobody likes that answer. But it doesn't matter. That's the only answer there is. And I think that there's great beauty in just the simple reminder of, hey, it's how you choose to fight. It's all about your choices. And I think that that's a really powerful and strong message that this episode delivers. And how does it deliver it? Well, it delivers it to Kanan through the hallmarks of an order past.
Yep.
It does that, Kanan's test, in my opinion, is my favorite of the episode. Kanan's test is my favorite of the episode because of how meaningful it is for Kanan as a character. What it does is the Temple Guard throws Kanan's fears all back in his face. You will never be strong enough to protect your people, and you will perish for your failure. These are not truths. These are fears. This is all about what Kanan worries will happen. That he's not strong enough to prevent his people from falling. And what does he do? He fights. He fights against it. He fights against the possibility that his people will fall to evil. He says, I won't let it happen. He physically takes up arms, his lightsaber in this case, against the Temple Guard. And then what happens? More show up. And they kick his ass. They beat the hell out of this guy. They back him into a corner. And it only comes to when he slows down and realizes you cannot fight forever. And then he wakes up and he says, you're right, I can't protect Ezra forever. And that's the lesson. The lesson is sometimes you don't need to fight. Sometimes it's the Obi-Wan line. You can't win, but there are alternatives to fighting. Jacob, do you have anything for Kanan's trial before the knighting?
Before the knighting, I think you covered it really well. I think Kanan, in some ways it's a continuation of the journey that he started season 1 with the Inquisitor, with the questions around him and Ezra and being able to protect him and being able to be a good teacher, a good master, and a good protector, also in a bit of a parental and protector role. And I think that obviously we see that very much continued here. and at a certain point, like he has to. I guess it mirrors his journey. Kind of mirrors Ezra's in a way where it's about giving up ultimate control. Ultimately, he doesn't have. There's only so much he can control. He can do everything he can to protect Ezra, but ultimately, he can't do it all. And he has to trust that Ezra. He has to trust that he will have trained Ezra well. Ezra has to accept that, as much as he wants to, he can't control every outcome in terms of protecting his friends. They both have to, in order to move forward with their training, their journeys as Jedi, they have to let go. They have to let go of control in a sense.
Yeah. What are both of your... Actually, I'll pass it to Brennen first. Anything about Kanan's trial?
No, I think we've covered that pretty well.
So obviously Kanan is knighted by the right of the council, by the will of the Force. Kanan Jarrus, you may rise. Wait, what does this mean? It means you are what I once was, a knight of the Jedi Order. What do both of you think? I'm curious about why this is the Grand Inquisitor. Why have the Grand Inquisitor do it? Why not have Yoda do it or somebody else do it? Why is it the Grand Inquisitor? Jacob,
It's an excellent question. It's an excellent question.
I think I have an answer, but I was wondering if I wanted to hear if any of you had another interpretation.
I think maybe the Grand Inquisitor in some ways symbolizes the state, what symbolizes what's at stake. Because the Grand Inquisitor was a Jedi who had all the training, who had everything, and he still fell to the dark side, like Kanan fears for Ezra. Maybe the Grand Inquisitor had all of the temple's training at his disposal, everything, and he still fell. Maybe that's trying to say to Kanan, to symbolize and to show, no matter what you do, at a certain point it will be out of your control. You need to be ready for that, and only by accepting that will you be the best teacher that you can be for Ezra. Maybe that's why they chose him, but I'm curious to hear what you guys think, because that's not a question that I really thought about all that much.
That is pretty much my interpretation, although I take it not as a warning for Ezra, but as a warning for Kanan. That conquering darkness, and especially conquering the darkness within yourself, is not something you just do once. It is a decision. Being a Jedi is a decision you make every single day. When you wake up, you make that decision, and some days you do better on it than others. But it is the Yoda says to Luke, Jedi must have the deepest commitment. And I think I think you're right that it is a warning to Kanan. It is a congratulations, but don't forget that this guy who you fought and defeated, who was extraordinarily evil, came from the same place that you are now. You are not safe from the darkness just because you're a Jedi Knight. You are still an active participant in the war, the constant war the Jedi are fighting with the dark side. Brendan, you have any other thoughts?
No, I think that I absolutely agree, and I think that's very well put.
All right, great. Let's see. We want to get to Ahsoka?
Yep.
I think so, yeah.
Ahsoka, why did you leave? Where were you when I needed you? Ahsoka thought that she could just waltz in to this temple, not a Jedi anymore, and be spared a Force experience. And the temple said to her, not so fast. you're getting one anyway. And yet again, this temple is throwing Ahsoka's own fears back at her. Because I think she still thinks about it. I think she still feels a little guilt about abandoning Anakin. First, I think just generally to death. But of course, now that she has figured out, at least she thinks she's figured out what Anakin has become, I think she feels even worse about it. You abandoned me. You failed me. Do you know what I've become? And then, of course, we see the infamous mask, the infamous armor in a cloud of red smoke. And we see Ahsoka finally fully confront the truth of what her master has turned into. What a moment. What a moment. What I really appreciate about this moment with this episode is that pre-Ahsoka, this was an incredibly cool moment and an emotional moment for Ahsoka, and then she lashes out and there's nothing there. That nobody's going to help her confront this. That this is something that she has to face all on her own. But what I really appreciate it now after Ahsoka, I think this is the first time I've seen this after Ahsoka. What I really appreciate about it now is that it is setting up her arc in that show. It is the setup of, does the creation of Darth Vader rest partly on Ahsoka? Is part of this her responsibility too? And if he receives training from the person who eventually became Darth Vader, does that mean that she's also destined for a path of evil? Because Anakin was seduced, is Ahsoka, one way or another, doomed? And I think Ahsoka season 1 follows up beautifully on that question with the episode Shadow Warrior, which, as of this recording, came out just over 2 years ago. That we'll get to in 2029 or something like that. I don't know. Yeah, Jacob, any thoughts about the Ahsoka's vision of what exactly her master has become?
And I think it's obviously it's a extremely chilling and memorable moment. I think that the question that I'm thinking about is why now? Why now that she finds out before
She already
they
kind
ever
of started
get to
to.
Malachor? She started to unravel the mystery, but this beyond the shadow of a doubt. Beyond the shadow of a doubt, this is her being forced to confronting the reality of her old friend and, where he went after their paths diverged.
I think that I understand your question, and I almost wonder if it was a decision in this episode made because they knew how much they needed to get to in Twilight of the Apprentice. Like, Twilight of the Apprentice is a double-length episode, and still there's a lot going on there. Like, you'll have to imagine that there was some stuff that they needed to get to, but they needed to front load. That they needed Ahsoka to know that so that they could get to Ahsoka finally confronting Vader, as now that they know now that she knows that he's alive and he knows that she's alive. I can see the idea of front loading earlier in the season, so that you don't have to waste time being like, oh my god, Anakin, in Twilight of the Apprentice, because they have a lot to do in that episode.
Yeah, that may be that is definitely part of it.
Yeah, I think so.
Brennan, I'll throw it to you. Any other thoughts about Ahsoka's vision?
Oh no, I think that it sets up what it needs to. And I like the idea that Ahsoka is not entirely certain that Anakin is Darth Vader until the confrontation on Malachor.
Yeah.
But she pretty much suspects that's what happened. But is in denial about it. And this is one of the puzzle pieces that leads to her making that acceptance in Twilight of the Apprentice. That no, that's what happened to him. And I like that she has this vision that is sad and uncomfortable because Anakin saying, "Why did you abandon me?" is Ahsoka's guilt haunting her. That am I the reason that he's dead or turned to the dark side? And this is part of setting up the confrontation between them. That really, in many ways, is the heart of the show.
Yeah, no, I love how much of a part of the Skywalker saga this episode becomes because
Yes.
of the centering of Ahsoka and Anakin. Yeah, it's great. I don't like not all of the show does fit that firmly into the Skywalker saga, and I like how this episode really just like cements itself as yeah, no, this is a part of the story of Anakin Skywalker and those around him. Two last things I want to discuss before we close up this episode, or at least go to the next part of this episode. First one, of course, Yoda's infamous warning to find Malachor, and Kanan and Ahsoka then clarifying it is its place. All the KOTOR 2 fans probably were psyched upon hearing this.
I was one of them.
I love the fact that Yoda says this, offers no explanations, and then dips.
Mm-hmm.
That is peak Yoda to me. Says cryptic thing, offers no explanation, gets the fuck out of there.
Absolutely.
And then the second thing is this tender moment between Yoda and Ahsoka, which I love.
Mm-hmm.
Where Ahsoka looks back and Yoda kind of gestures at her. It's only seconds long, but those looks say so much. Like Yoda apologizing for and recognizing everything that has happened to her. Go ahead.
It's also the Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade moment.
Oh yeah, it is. You're right.
With the knight waving to
with the knight.
Henry.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. I didn't even think of that. Good point. It is the Last Crusade moment. But like just generally like in that emotion, like Yoda apologizing for and recognizing everything that happened to her, including what she was just shown. Ahsoka kind of forgiving him for not realizing the Jedi's fault before it was too late. Them both acknowledging that they missed each other throughout these years. It's just so good. My God. There's so much emotion contained with just those glances.
Multitudes
it's beautiful.
Of emotion. Absolutely.
I wasn't gonna say, but yeah, and then they throw Vader back in the picture at the end. The Jedi are growing in their power. It will be their undoing.
I love that line. I love that line.
It's a damn good line to end the episode on. Yes. Brennan, I'll throw it to you first. Overall thoughts on this episode?
This is a terrific episode and one of my favorites of this season. I love the mystical side of Star Wars. The mysticism, the philosophy, the ideas of the Force, the idea of destiny, the idea of your destiny is not set, you can choose whether to be good or evil. I think George Lucas had said that the bottom line of Star Wars is that every day you can choose to be good or be evil. And every little action is going to be important. And so any episode that deals with the philosophy of Star Wars is always going to resonate with me. And this one certainly does.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
I thought this was an amazing episode as well. Yeah, I think the getting to see once again the complexities of Ahsoka and Anakin and their relationship, of Kanan and his relationship to being a mentor, of Ezra and his relationship to being a Jedi. It's fantastic, and it's very well done in this episode.
Yeah,
It's a treat.
this episode covers a lot, and it covers it efficiently, and it covers it well with a lot of depth, and it's one of my favorites of the season. I think just under the finale. But yeah, the road to Malachor begins here. But before we get going, we have some questions to ask Brennan. We ask 10 questions to our first-time guests, but Brennan's been on many times, but we've updated them since, and we have 2 new ones. So, Brennan, if you could write your own piece of Star Wars media, what would it be about?
Oh gosh, well, I mean that's easy right now. It's Luke Skywalker's Jedi Academy.
Oh yeah, oh hell yeah!
I mean,
It's a story that
I would do it animated so that Mark Hamill could do the voice.
I could see that. Yeah, no, I know that. Yeah, go ahead.
See a young Ben Solo, see some of the other students, learn who the other teachers were.
Yeah,
and also giving us a glimpse of the timeline too.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of. Yeah, I think a lot of us have been. A lot of folks have been talking about that, and I totally agree. Yeah, no, I think that that would be great. I think that would be. I think that'd be awesome. Yeah, and then the final question is, what has Star Wars meant to you in your life?
Oh man, I mean, I am or at least I try to be a religious person. And because Star Wars has so many themes and ideas of philosophy, theology, religion, spirituality, those have always connected with me, and I think that so many of the great lessons in Star Wars have that religious element that I connect with because of how I choose to try to live. And that's really one of the big reasons why Star Wars means so much to me.
Fantastic. Love hearing that. I guess we do have one more question for you, which is, where can we find you?
Well, you can find me on BlueSky, Brennen Marr at BlueSky.social. You can find me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube at Page Turners They Were Not.
Fantastic. I think that's going to be it for this episode of Star Wars in a Galaxy. Next week, episode 183 of Star Wars in a Galaxy, The Forgotten Droid and the Mystery of Chopper Base are the episodes we're covering. In the meantime, you can listen to us everywhere. You can follow us on BlueSky at inagalaxypod.bsky.social, on Instagram at inagalaxypod. You can follow me everywhere. My link tree is linktr.ee/_OchiFan327. Epic Confrontation should be back pretty soon with Nikki Kumar versus Buck O'Brien. We're hoping to record that pretty soon. And I think...
And now you have to make me choose between 2 people I love.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
Boy.
But yeah, no, thanks so much to Brennan for coming on.
Thank you.
I think, if there's nothing else, may the Force be with you.
Bye.
Always.